Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, Neighbors Demand I Let Them Use My Private Property Because They Landlocked Themselves. TLDR. Neighbor sells part of his land and landlocks himself with no way to the main road. He thinks he can just use my gated driveway without permission and is sorely mistaken. He calls the police and instead of arresting him for trespassing convince me to let him through that one time. We go to court over it with him claiming I am blocking him when in reality he blocked himself. At the end of the day, I end up buying the extra land and he moves away instead of offering to work something out with the land. Hopefully he will think before he acts next time. The land where I live is a little bit complicated and my dumb neighbor made it even more so by selling some of his land without thinking something through. The way it is laid out is that on one side of the land is a main road and that is the only official road for any of us to access from where we are. The other side of our land is woods and then eventually a lake, so the point I want clear is that the main road is the only way to get anywhere by car. I have built my own little road and gated it in so that I could have a path for my truck to get from the road to my house. My neighbor had a much more basic gravel road for the same thing. That is enough for the annoying needed backstory, and we can start with what my neighbor did that made him stupid. He wanted to downsize and ended up selling a decent chunk of his land off to someone else. He didn't keep any land though that connects to the main road and his current path now belongs to them. He basically got himself stuck where he has no way to the main road and is landlocked. I honestly have no idea how he managed to look at the maps and paperwork and not see this potential problem at least once. I can at least say we never actually had issues with this neighbor before. We are a very close in proximity but keep to ourselves kind of people. I assume that he thought he could use that same gravel road, but the new owners have livestock and actually got rid of it and fenced in their area. Now he was basically stuck and the only way in or out was my road. I am going to blunt in saying that I didn't want this guy driving through my property, and since the gate was remote activated he couldn't just manually open it up. You would think that any smart person would try to at least speak to me first, because while I didn't want him using it I might have while he figured something else out. I really don't know what though. Instead, he just showed up one night and kept buzzing to be let into the gate. I didn't want to start some kind of pattern, so I ignored it and didn't let him through. I don't even know how he got out, but if I go through all my thoughts I will be typing forever. He then got out of the car and walked to my house yelling that I needed to let him through. I told him to get the hell off my property before I called the cops on him for trespassing. Turns out he called the cops before I could, and I had to explain the entire thing to them. They honestly had no idea what to do about the entire situation and had to call their supervisor. We went back and forth for a while before he asked, more like demanded, I let him through this time until we can sort things out properly. He called the next day telling me that the police didn't want to get involved in these kinds of disputes and would hope the two of us could come to some sort of agreement. I will save you all the suspense because we didn't come close to any agreement. He wanted full access, a remote key, and made it clear he had no plans to figure anything else out. I put my foot down and told him that he wasn't allowed on my property anymore. I thought it would be the end, but he tried to actually get a lawyer on this thing. Despite him trespassing on my property and calling the police, he was now trying to get me in trouble for not allowed him to use it. They were trying to argue that I wasn't allowed to block any sanctioned road. I had to go and hire a lawyer who told me that I was very smart for not giving him access because now he can't claim I took it away. The biggest flaw in his whole case was simply that it wasn't a real road that I was denying him access to. I know I had been calling it a road due to its length, but really it is just a very long driveway. It goes from the main road and then to my house, which I at least see as a driveway. Even if it isn't, it is still a private road. It doesn't have a name and it wouldn't be on any maps since it isn't sanctioned. In fact, to get to his house he would need to get through my gate, drive to my house, and then from there drive on the grass all the way to his house. During this whole process he wasn't allowed to really get in and out of his property easily, so he was staying with family in the nearby town. He kept threatening that I was going to have to pay for every day I refused him access to his land, but he really had no case. The combination of it being my gated driveway and the fact he would destroy my grass going through it meant that it was in fact mine. If he tried to go on it, I had full rights to call the police and have him arrested for trespassing. That got me angry, since that is what should have happened at the start before I had to pay all of these lawyer fees. I know that I might sound harsh, but please keep in mind he really did this to himself. He left himself with property and no way to get in and out of it. He was in control of what he sold and most likely could have given himself a small strip big enough to make a path for him to get through. Instead, he just assumed without asking that me and even the guy he sold the land to would be fine with him coming and going through our property. He made a really dumb decision, and instead of trying to rectify it, he doubled down by making more bad choices. Now you might want to know what he did, since he had this land he couldn't access. The other guy was brought in and the three of us mediated possible solutions. I would sell him that strip of land between the properties so he could make his own little path. The other guy even offered the possibility of moving the property lines around so that he would still get the land he paid for, it would just be shifted to work a little better. My dumb neighbor wanted none of these solutions and instead was fixated on that one of us needed to buy his property. The other guy just couldn't do it after just buying, so that left me. I really didn't need the land and wanted to say no at first. His lawyer thought made a decent offer on the land, so I decided I would buy it and figure out what to do with it later. My lawyer fees were going to come out of pocket because I knew trying to sue neighbor would just be more stress than it was worth. I allowed moving vans to use my driveway that one time just so I could get him out of there without issues or police. Maybe in the future he will make smarter decisions, but I sadly doubt it. The next story is titled, "Harass My Family and Threaten My Kids? I'll make you lose your claim for late fees and interest." TLDR. Landlady wanted late fees with interest and harassed us. She thinks tribal law will protect her. Took her to court and she was reprimanded, but nothing was done. She got bad advice from her lawyer brother and cancelled our lease so they could evict us, but screwed themselves out of late fees and interest which she was counting on. This happened about 6 years ago. This is long but so worth it. We live on a Native American reservation. The law here is based upon tribal teachings. The judges travel around our reservation because there are not enough to go around. As a result, a lot of offenses get mediated or dismissed by the court. Crimes go unpunished due to this lack of judges and police. So landlord-tenant disputes fall way down the priority list. We needed a place to stay ASAP. We were being evicted from our current place due to the behavior of one of our children. That's another story. Anyway, we looked in our small town and found nothing. Then, someone said they saw a for rent sign and told us where to go. We called the number and got in touch with a lady who lived in town. The lady said the rental agent lived in a town where my mother lives and where she grew up and knows a ton of people. I called her and asked her if she knew this person. She said yes and that they were related to us. She called the agent, now relative, and they said they were renting the place for their sister who lived in another state. They had just evicted the prior tenants and the place hadn't been cleaned up yet. We told him we needed a place soon and would clean up the place ourselves. Had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. He directed us back to his niece who we talked to initially. She lived in our town and could show us the place. Being desperate, we overlooked cosmetic issues like the tub being turned on with a crescent wrench, filthy oh my god carpet, non-working cooler, huge burn on the carpet in front of the fireplace, broken windows and door. The door seriously never locked the entire time we lived there. We later found a disgusting soiled pair of men's underwear shoved in the bathroom vent, ew. And on and on. We paid the deposit and first month's rent and moved in on assurances that the missing or broken things would be fixed. It was just getting to winter and we were excited to have a central cooler for the heat of summer. Our last place had a cooler but it only blew out of one vent. This place had a vent in every room. Oh yeah. Over time, nothing was fixed. Or, if it was, it soon broke. Cosmetic issues were ignored. The house always seemed cold even if the fireplace was blazing away. The stove only had 2 working burners, etc. But, we enjoyed the large property and had room for a trampoline and a large garden. The weeds had to be cleared. It took days even with the whole family helping. Found a bunch of 40 ounces beer bottles. Alcohol is illegal here. We were relatively happy at the home and were there for several months when unrepaired things got out of hand. We had stopped calling the niece and rental agent and communicated directly with the landlady. She even came by a few times while she was in town and we had a few long phone calls talking about our lives. Our status as her family. I think she used to not really do the proper repairs or ignoring the situation. Also the fact that housing here is really hard to find and she knew it. So, we put up with it until summer came with no working cooler. We told the landlady, again. She sent over the creepy guy who fixes things at the house. Another story. Jump to a few weeks later and we are still without a cooler. I tell her we're taking half the cost of all the fans we had to buy out of the rent and a partial refund for the 6 weeks we had been without a cooler plus any time after that we didn't have one. She suddenly becomes short and says I have to pay rent in full. We go back and forth for a while and things get a bit heated. She is really pissed now and I know I've said things that weren't nice but she wasn't either. We end the call with nothing resolved. Months pass, weather gets cool and we pay full rent again. All this time she is charging us late fees for the months during the summer where we only paid partial rent. Really we deducted only $25 a month for 3 or 4 months when we needed the cooler. We did this every summer we lived there. We are short and businesslike when we speak but she begins to call us to ask when we will have the money for the back rent and $2 a day late fee. We rock along like this a few summers. We also took money out for repairs to the house. She hated that and deducted the repair costs to our owed balance. A lot of other things happened that would make this long story longer. Suffice it to say, she harassed us by phone and in person whenever she could. I should explain that by this time we were having financial problems. My husband, who works from home, was making less money. I had job I loved but was not making much more than minimum wage. So, we fell behind in rent but she got money whenever we did. I kept track as she never ever provided us with a receipt. After another year of this, she got more demanding and started to threaten eviction over the disputed cooler money, repairs, late fees and a month's rent. This goes on for a few months and she then says she is going to come to town and get the money personally or evict us. Soon. She didn't say when. Great. I did the only thing I could think of. I knew some of the things she was doing were not legal. But, the reservation I lived on had its own laws and people tend to look upon the reservation as a sort of lawless place. I looked up tribal laws on landlord-tenant disputes. There were none. Just a few sentences saying they went by our state's landlord-tenant laws. Oh yeah. What this lady didn't know was that I loved the law. I read law cases for fun. Many an evening I spent reading law threads, criminal cases etc. So, I found and printed out the entire landlord-tenant laws. Like, over 100 pages. I read and reread the laws. I had my ammunition. She ends up calling me a week or so later to threaten us again. By this time we had been there over 4 years and I unleash 4+ years of complaints and how by law we are entitled to the deductions. She basically tells me she will get her money and that our state's laws don't apply here. A lot of people think that. So, I ask my mom what kind of lawyer he is as I'm not sort of freaked. Turns out his area of law had nothing to do with tenant law. At all. Oh yeah. This becomes important later. She starts to call more frequently to harass us. Her fave was to leave long threatening messages. When she was in town, she had a neighbor spy on us and tell her when we left the house. Her tactic was to show up mere minutes after we left. Our daughter would call us and tell us she was there. She would tell the kids she was there to inspect and come in. She would ask the kids if we left her any money. It was unsettling. We felt harassed. And you don't mess with my kids. So, in an effort to make her back off, we filed a restraining order against her. She had come over and threatened to lock the gate and lock us out. I knew this was illegal and spurred me on to file the restraining order. The case was set for the following week. I am assuming knew people either in the police department or court because she was not served until the morning of the hearing but somehow came prepared. We showed up to the court and I tell the judge that she is harassing us. I show him the lease and tell him all the things that have been going on. She interrupts a few times and gets reprimanded. We get to the part where she threatened to lock us out. She breaks in and says that a cop told her she could do that. The judge told her no and that she could be sued if she did that. She gives the cop's name in an effort to get him in trouble for telling her incorrect information. The judge doesn't care and tells her she cannot threaten her tenants with a lockout without proper procedure. Then, she tries to get the judge to serve us with a 30-day eviction notice. The judge says he's not a process server, and also the notice cannot be written for 30 days as the lease says 60 days notice. I wanted to laugh at this point. Her lawyer brother had advised her will wrong because I'm thinking he never read the tenant laws. Anyway, I get no restraining order, but he tells her to back off, and nothing was said about the other house issues, but she gets reprimanded by the judge. I now know that she is trying to evict us. So, besides stepping up my house hunting efforts, I go over my documentation of our house paperwork and decide to write a letter to her stating the date I thought our lease ended, saying she cannot come over without proper notice and to only communicate with us via post. After I sent the letter, a casual perusal of our lease revealed to me that our lease had no end date. We were locked into this lease as long as she wanted. She could charge us late fees forever. We were toast. I was so upset. How could I mess up like that? No, yeah. A few days later, I get a reply from her brother. He concurs with our lease end date. Crap. It was about 3 years prior, so, with no valid lease they can evict us in 30 days per state law. They inform us of this in the letter. My heart sinks. I go back to my tenant law and sure enough, it's there. But, I see a law stating that with no lease, she cannot charge us late fees or interest. This is the bulk of what she says we owe her. The reason we began all this in the first place. Oh yeah. I break out my adding machine and go over payments made since the lease ended, which was way before we got behind on rent. We were only $375 behind. Oh yeah. I write them a letter stating that I got their eviction notice. I informed them that the canceling of the lease concurred by both parties negated the late fees and interest the landlady wanted. I enclosed a check, all we had, for the balance, and said that crashing of the check would signal that payment to her was in full. Oh yeah. I always wonder what their reaction to my letter was. Finding out they screwed themselves by canceling the lease. They were so focused on evicting us they forgot to keep an eye on the whole picture and read the law. During all this time, she had been laughing at us, telling us state law had nothing to do with our reservation and asking for her money in nastier and nastier tones. I imagine she was mad at her brother for the bad advice. She wanted money from us badly, and he advised her to agree with us and cancel the lease 3 years prior to get us out in 30 days. Which solved her immediate problem but negated her claim on money, which was her whole motivation. I did not go after the deposit. That would have entailed more court and I had a life to live. I also highly doubt I have ever got a penny from her. My vengeance was done. Knowing I outsmarted a lawyer added frosting on top of the cake. Don't mess with me or my family even if you're part of it. Oh yeah. Thank you for listening.